this meeting to order, the Budget Committee and the CUAB. We'll start with introductions. I'll just launch it here. I'm the Citizen Chair.
Hilda Park, City Councilor.
Jacob Stetson, CUAB.
Kathy Heisey, City Council.
Kaylee Nance, Citizen Budget Committee member.
Leslie Schachner, Citizen member.
CUAB.
Kelly Brooks, Assistant City Manager.
Steve Adams, City Engineer.
Peter Pastorelli, Public Works Director.
So many people.
Michael Osborne, citizen member.
Ann Ober, City Manager.
Bonnie Dennis, Finance Director. Mary Rowe, Budget Committee member.
Lisa Beatty, City Councilor.
Angel Falconer, City Council.
Mark Gamba, Mayor.
Agenda item 3, approval of the prior meeting minutes, October 28th.
Move to approve.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We have a new agenda item here. This is based on guidance from Scott Stauffer, analysis of a lot of the different committee meetings. We want to have an opportunity for public comment. So if anyone from the public wants to make a point.
Yeah, I'll make a point.
All right.
Okay.
Tell me who you are and where you're from.
All right.
Good. No, I'm good.
Hello, I'm Elvis Clark, and my question or comment on the budget document was we have these goals you had adopted for this year, this biennium, and one of them, well, 3 of them, but I was interested in knowing what kind of staff time and monies that you've dedicated to these goals, like goal number 2 in particular. And that would be most interested in, since the inception of the Climate Action Plan, actually how much the city spent in time and monies. Anyways, I don't know if you have a best guess of that, or just staff has looked at it, that separate item at all, or made it a separate item or not.
So when it's public comment for the City Council, what we typically do is we accept public comment instead of actually responding back to the
Okay.
public during the meeting. But I appreciate you coming up, and if you and I want to step off to the side at the end of this, we can totally talk about it.
Oh, maybe some time later, because I have to go to a neighborhood association meeting.
Okay.
Anyways, thank you all.
Thanks, Alice.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, appointment of chair and vice chair.
Right, the last time that we appointed a chair and a vice chair was in 2018, based on the budget, or not the budget, the boards and commissions guidance that we received from our city recorder. We actually should be appointing a chair every year. So with that, we're opening up the nominations for a chair and a vice chair.
For chair and vice chair.
Yeah, so John Stahl is the chair. We actually, I do not think we did a vice chair at the last one. So,
We do always have a council, we try and have both, so I actually am wondering if it was,
I think I was the
Councilor Beatty was the,
Lisa, yeah.
So it's a citizen chair and a city council vice chair.
That's what we've done historically.
I would like to nominate John Stoll as our chair.
So what we're looking to get Bonnie for these 2, it's like that,
I'll second.
16 million?
All right, it's been moved and seconded to have me continue as the chairman here.
Some of this.
I guess my discussion would be, I've been doing this for a while, and if anyone else wants to take over the gavel, have it. Otherwise, I'd be happy to continue to serve.
Well, we have a lot of new citizen members this last year, so maybe next January, some of them will be ready to
Step up to the plate.
step up to the plate.
Yeah, and I do very much appreciate your leadership, John. You're doing a nice job.
Any further discussion? So we'll take the motion for the chairman and then do the vice chairman?
Yeah.
So it's been moved and seconded that I continue on as chairman. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Vice chair?
Opening up to nominations.
I'm happy to nominate Lisa if Lisa wants to keep doing it. Are you
Well,
willing?
it's a super easy job because John has never gone, so.
Yeah. If that's a motion, I'd be happy to second that.
Moved and seconded to have Lisa be the vice chair. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. City manager update.
Most of the major projects are going to be talked about as a part of the CIP, so I am actually going to stay very short. The one major project that's not included in the CIP discussion tonight is the new City Hall. And so I did just want to give you an update that at this time, we've reached the end of negotiations with the current owner. We expect to close probably actually in June. We had originally thought it would be this spring, but because if you haven't seen the white tarps on the building, they're doing the improvements prior to us closing to make sure that the building is completely done with the renovations to deal with the water intrusion. So we will close near the end of the year. That does not change when we take ownership of the building. It only changes when we close on the building. We wanted to make sure it was still in this fiscal year, which means that the close date is currently June 23rd. But overall, it's been a great discussion. Council had a discussion at the last council meeting just about where different major functions would sit, so we would be able to determine a budget. But we're still on track for what we discussed with all of you, which was no more than $7 million worth of debt. And then we'll be doing other investments up front for the down payment. We still believe we'll be below the $7 million mark for the debt issuance. Are there any questions about what's happening at the city? And I should caveat, if we want to do that question after we go through the CIP and after staff have had a chance to present that whole document, I'm happy to answer any questions outside of the CIP that people may have about current policy areas or trajectory. Does that work?
So we'll treat that as kind of as an other item after the CIP update.
That sounds great.
Moves us to item 7, and Bonnie, it's asked me in advance that we try and expedite this, kind of streamline it, because we've got so much to do on the CIP part, so.
Right, so I'm going to go over the second quarter of fiscal year 2020 financial report. I'm actually just going to do some quick highlights rather than do the full presentation that I normally do, so that we can have time for the CIP discussion, and so we're not here all night. So a few things I wanted to point out. If you go to the first page, all the numbers for fiscal year 2019 are audited financials. We did receive a clean opinion from our auditors. That's we're very proud of. And shout out to Keith, who was a major contributor to help with the CAFR and the PAFR. So please feel free to check out our financials up on the finance website. And reach out to one of us if you have any questions. The other item I wanted to point your attention to is on page 10, and that would be within the Building Inspections Fund. There'll be a couple things that you notice here. We are projecting that fees and charges are quite a bit over budget related to the number of buildings that are coming up and the inspections that we've had. But with that, we've also had an increased number of contractual services. So we are tracking that materials and services line item, 'cause that's where contractual services lies. So contractual services, we have a contract for inspectors to go and make sure that the building's up to code, and Sam, our building official, she's quite busy with a lot of inspections, so we have to contract that out for a number of reasons. So we did, many of you recall, we transferred over $100,000. I did talk to Sam. She is still projecting that we are still within that budget, but we are keeping a close eye on that. The other item that we're taking a look at is the personnel services. We are slightly over budget right now, and so that's another area where we're making sure that we're either going to be right in line, or we might have to do a transfer when we come back in June for the supplemental.
I have just, since I'm still getting
Please.
used to
Yeah.
terminology, what is the Metro excise revenue?
So
It's in number 2 of your notes.
yeah, so it's a tax that we actually receive
From Metro.
from Metro.
To us.
Yeah, so it's an intergovernmental agreement that we have with Metro for a tax that we receive related to construction projects.
Okay, so and it's tied
And
to
projects.
construction.
Building-
Construction
yeah,
excise tax.
Is it tied to the level of our construction, or is it a
Yes.
cities get a certain amount kind of thing?
No, it's tied to the number of permits we receive.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the revenue generated. Okay. Okay, if you go to the wastewater fund on page 17, I also wanted to point out that there were some overages in personnel costs. This will likely generate a budget transfer that we'll come back to you on. It's the main reasons why there's an overage is some medical benefit changes that we've had, and then there were some promotions from a Utility 1 to Utility 2 technician related to some certifications. So those are unforeseen things at the budget time, so they're minor. So we'll come back, though, and do a transfer and make sure that that line item does not go over budget for the biennium.
So if you have any category that's over, you need to,
Yes.
move money around?
Yeah.
It's not overall expenditures?
Yeah, so per budget law, if we are over in any of our expenditures, revenue's not, but in our expenditures for the biennium, then we either should have done a transfer or budget supplemental before we actually expended the money, or at the end of the year, so that we don't get written up in our audit and against budget law.
So transfer is kind of an internal thing, and then...
So, but it's a terminology. So budget transfers are when it's not necessary for a public hearing. A public hearing is if the total expenditures is 10% more of the
Then you go supplemental.
balance, then you do a supplemental.
Okay.
So we'll come back as a supplemental in June because of the building and the debt that we're obtaining.
Final cleanup.
And the cleanup, yeah. But typically, something like this would be just a budget transfer if we were, and it would just be a quick council adoption at the time.
I have another sort of process question. I noticed on these funds that there's a cash from operations category underneath here, which I think was put in at John's request because he wanted to see the expenditures and the broken out from the capital costs. My question is, I guess what I have thought about this is that for me, it doesn't get to what I think the point was, because it lists all the revenues and then it lists operating costs without any of the capital costs, which sort of implies that we have a lot of extra cash. And it seems to me like if we wanted to be looking at what our expenditures are compared to the capital costs, we ought to have the revenue that's already tied to capital taken out of the revenue line item. Otherwise, we're comparing apples to oranges. Does that make sense? I mean, am I being clear about why
I think it's two different ways to get to the same result, but my intent was to show how much revenue is available for capital financing. And with the other presentation, it's hard to see that. Here, it's very clear. You're planning on a certain amount, and you're generally over-recovering that amount. And as we'll get into the CIP discussion, we're also underspending on the capital. So as a result, reserves just continue to grow. But I'm kind of gotten off that bandwagon now, so.
So the implication is that whatever is total cash from operations is in fact going into capital? Is that, if that's the budget line item that we're looking at?
It's either available for capital or increasing reserves.
Right,
Same thing.
that's correct.
Okay, I'm still not, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I just am trying to figure out how to make it useful for the way I think, I guess. I don't know.
So basically, though, the total revenues less the operating costs, so those are the personnel services and staff and
Right.
supplies, those kinds of things. The total balance of the total cash from operations, that's the number that will go to either the capital or to the reserves.
But at this point, it's already budgeted for capital, right?
I'm not following.
I mean, we have capital outlay budgeted already at 2.67 million.
Look at this. I don't have mine.
So if capital is budgeted at 2.67 million and we have 2.54 million available, what is that? I don't understand.
Yeah,
We just won't spend the full amount that's budgeted
right.
because we don't have enough.
We don't, yeah. I mean, you can look at capital outlay, just even in fiscal year 19 and 20, it's considerably less than 2.6 million.
Right.
So, and you'll hear more about why tonight, but that's mainly because projects, either they get delayed or there's some other factors that play into it, but there's other funds. Transportation has been spending that quite a bit, so.
Can I ask one more question on this and then I will be quiet?
Go ahead.
When you list the obligated funds in all of these funds, does that mean that those are funds or that are obligated to the point that they will carry over into the next year? Are they going to be?
No, those are, obligated funds are contracts. So we have contracts in place for like if you look at page 17 on wastewater, the SCADA system.
Right.
Or the SSMP paving is probably a better illustration, that's 7,000. That means we have obligated funds on a contract, so we will be paying 7,330.
So does that 7,300 show up as an expense already in the budget? I mean, in the...
No.
No.
No, those are remaining contract amounts. So in the financials, the dollar figure you see here is actual money that we have spent out the date, paid a check,
Okay.
invoiced out. But the remaining contract amount is the money that is in a contract that is expected to be paid.
By the end of the year?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Now I'm done.
Okay.
You're going to be teaching the class pretty soon, Leslie.
I love that you ask questions, Leslie, really. Never apologize. Never
Yeah, no, it's great.
I'm just
yeah.
trying to get up to speed here.
Yep. No worries. That's good. Okay. I think those are the main items that I had for the quarterly report that I just wanted to point out.
I have one question on the library fund.
Okay.
Your intergovernmental capital donations.
What page is library?
Page 11.
11.
So we had a flexible budget of 563, and we've got 76 so far. I'm just kind of curious, where's that money coming from?
We did get, there's actually more money coming that actually we did pick up on. There's in miscellaneous, there's a recoding that we need to do for the Energy Trust Grant that we actually received. It got booked into miscellaneous. It'll actually be bumped into intergovernmental. So that was something that we actually caught today. So, so there is just a reclass entry. In total, the line item is correct. I'll have to dig into it more, and I'll have
that's
to check
fine.
in with Katie, our library director, to see what she's anticipating to come in. But yeah, we are under budget there.
I wasn't sure if that was from like the library district or,
No, the library district would be, the levy that we receive would be the intergovernmental line item. And you'll,
Sorry. One above it.
yeah, the one right above it.
right. Yeah.
So, and that usually comes in January, February.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So just so I'm clear, John, are you looking for the 76,000, where is that money actually coming from?
Well, we had something in the budget for almost $500,000. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, whose money is that?
Right.
It says capital donation. It's like, okay, well, who's ponying up the money?
We'll bring it back to you, and we can send an email. My guess is that when we were working on the library project, we were making estimates of grants and contributions for fundraising that we were trying to do for the library. And so those dollars were a goal that we set with all of you.
Right.
And then the actuals ended up being substantially different, and we found other ways of either removing things from the project or making the budget work. I'm guessing, but we can send you an email.
Sounds very plausible to me.
Actually, it's very correct.
Yeah.
That is very correct.
Right.
We will definitely not make the $691,000.
Right.
Yeah.
At the time you prepared the budget, you were scrambling for dollars and you threw something in there.
We sent, I think, we tried on 6 different grants to secure funding, and so that's why I think that that's probably
Okay.
the number, is that we were making an estimate of what we would attempt to secure.
I have a question on the library. I was looking at the property tax revenue being low. Can I assume that by the end of the year, it will actually match the property tax that is budgeted? Or if property taxes come in lower, will the library be cut a percentage or what?
Yeah, so we, actually, I was looking at property tax just today, so it's a good question. So the property taxes, the estimate, if the actuals come in below the estimate, we actually do an allocation between the general fund and the library fund, and then also the debt service obviously gets their portion of the property tax. So we do a full allocation every month to true it up, basically. So the estimates that you see in the flexible budget or the total biennium budget was an estimate at the time based off of an assessed value growth from the county. That doesn't, at the time of the budget, it does not mean that we're actually always going to get that, but that's just an estimate. So so we're not anticipating that there'll be any change in how the library spends just because they're slightly below budget in the property tax. It pretty much works itself out. Is that what you're trying to, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, I was just interested to know if it would be reallocated out if it was low, or if in fact it would always get that amount and it would go somewhere else. So in terms of the historical record, are we generally getting as much property taxes as we've been given to believe by the assessor?
Yeah, we're pretty close. I'm right in the middle of the analysis to configure that, but I'd say we're pretty on track from what their estimates are. Yeah.
But the library gets a fixed percentage, right? Didn't we a couple of years ago establish that they get a fixed percentage of the
Yes.
general fund dollars?
Yes.
So if we're low in the library fund, then we're low all across
Yeah.
the board.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So when property taxes come in, the allocation goes out to general fund and to the library fund. So if property taxes are less than anticipated, general fund also has less property tax revenue coming in.
They share in the shortfall.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Let's talk CIP.
Well, good evening. I'm Peter Pastorelli, the Public Works Director, and this evening we have a couple things we wanted to cover with you. First off, I wanted to talk a little bit about the CUAB's recommendations regarding our utility rates for the next biennium. And then Kelly Brooks, our Assistant City Manager, will cover Phase 1 of our integrated CIP program and also a forecast of the Phase 2 of our CIP program, integrated CIP program. And then we'll follow that up with a discussion of our large impact projects that we have within our CIP forecasted for next year. So our rate recommendations, so we spent some time over the winter with CUAB, had several meetings starting all the way back in November, and wrapped up the recommendations this month in February. And we took a look at several things as we put together the rate recommendations for the utilities. We drew from our rate study, our water and wastewater rate study that we did last year with Utility Financial Services. They went through and did a 5-year projection of those two utilities and made some rate recommendations for the next 5 years, and then put together a rate design for the current year that we're in. And we're going to take a look at using some of those same rate recommendations to make some adjustments to our rates for the upcoming biennium as well. We use as a basis the 2014 Stormwater Master Plan as part of our rate study or rate recommendation. We had some significant discussions about that in the current master plan that we have. That master plan recommends a 13.78% increase for this upcoming fiscal year, followed by a 10.71% increase. We took a look at some options on how we could reduce those increases. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then for our SAFE and SSMP program, we rely on the construction cost index. And what we use is the regional index from Seattle, and have a 3-year average index that we use. And then we also took a look at what potential growth and consumption data that we had related to the water utilities, and if we needed to make any adjustments there. We took a really conservative approach in terms of growth and consumption. Our consumption data generally has been trending downwards over the last 5 to 6 years. We do anticipate some growth related to development that we've picked up as part of that, but it's really conservative growth. And then we also took a look at some of the investment income that we generate, and that's also very conservative too. So the rate recommendations that the CUAB discussed and forwards as the recommendations are for water for the upcoming fiscal year. They recommend a 0% increase, and then followed by a 2.5% increase for the second year of the biennium. And then the wastewater, a 2.5% and 2.5% increases. And then in storm, we think we can, by using some debt, about $2.5 million in debt, we have a lot of capital projects generally related to the Meek Street project that we can, by using debt, we can keep those projected increases from 13 and 10 down to 2.5 and 2.5 for each of those years. And that's making an assumption that we're going to take out debt for about 20 years with an interest rate of about 4%. And then the SSMP and SAFE construction cost index for Seattle is about 3.59% each. So one of the other things we'll do as we move forward at our next CUAB meeting in March is we'll put together the projected rate design. So I do have a rate impact if it was just a 2.5, those rate recommendations across the board for the water and the wastewater utilities. But one of the things we did last year is we designed rates to lower the impact on low users. That residents and customers that we had that used a low amount of water. So we're going to do the same thing and make some adjustments to those rates so that the impact on low users is not significant. And then one of the other things that we wanted to do is we wanted to bring the cost of service to our larger commercial customers closer to what that cost of service actually is. So some of our fixed customer charges related to the large customers are actually on the lower end than they need to be. So we're going to make some adjustments to those as well. And then the long-term projections for both the water and the wastewater are 2.5% increases in 23 and 24 for both of those. So Kelly's going to talk a little bit about the phase 1 and phase 2 part of the SSMP and SAFE program.
Yeah, and then once I'm done, I'm going to hand it over to Steve to talk a lot more about specific project details. But before I go into it, I also just wanted to stop for a minute and acknowledge kind of why we're doing this way this year, because this is new for us, and I believe it's new for all of you. So we wanted to have this joint conversation both with the Budget Committee and CUAB prior to rate recommendations or the CIP being finalized, so we could just all be in the room together and see what assumptions are feeding into both sides of this conversation. And so thanks for doing it. You're getting some of this information. Some of it may seem a little rougher than maybe in years past because of just where we are at in the budget cycle. It's February. We have a few more months left to go. But we thought it was important to talk to you all now and hear kind of what questions you have for us as we're proceeding and moving these documents forward. I am I'm the person who's here that worked with council in 2018 to help structure the first of our kind of integrated bond programs for transportation. So we took our SAFE funding, our SSMP, and our gas tax, and we worked with council to bond those resources. And the reason for that is council had just created the SAFE program. It was a 25-year plan. And there was a lot of interest and desire in being able to deliver those projects faster. So that was what sort of sparked the conversation, was how can you take this 25-year program and get it out there earlier so that folks can use those sidewalks and facilities today instead of from 25 years from now. And so when you did that, it started to touch everything, right? It's hard to put in a sidewalk unless you can do the ADA ramps, and you can't really do that unless you pave. And so it ended up really being that we needed to take these three funding sources, look at them together, and do an integrated CIP program in a pretty robust way. And so we did that, and for the first bond series that we did, combined all those different programs, was for up to $21 million. And I'm happy to say that we're clipping right along with those. Steve's going to talk more about projects, but you can see we've made quite a bit of progress in ticking off some of our first phase 1, Selwood, Ardenwald, Kronberg, our SSMP projects downtown. All of those at the top have been completed. And then the remainder of our phase 1 projects are in design. Some of those are going to construction this year. Some of them are going to construction next summer. Some of them are 2 seasons. The fun that we get to have, as I'm sure you all know, with the CIP world is almost always our projects straddle a construction season. We don't have hardly anything that wraps up at the end of June. So we're always kind of looking at that. So you'll see some of these projects, we have end-of-year adjustments we always need to make. But these are the ones that are in design. And like I said, Steve will show you a list with more detail and a map in a minute that gives more information for those. So when we talked about this and we said, hey, okay, we want to go faster. How do we want to do this? We're okay with the bonding. We first talked about doing just one big old lump sum, all 9 years at once. And at the time, we just weren't, the comfort level wasn't there yet to do that. So it was broken into 3 series, essentially. And so it was assumed that we would come back again when we do phase 2 and talk about bonding again. And so that's what you're going to see in this conversation. I'm presenting you projects as if we're going to bond again. So let me tell you a little bit more about that on my next slide. So you can see that we're just going to keep on going. You can also see that I've forgotten how to make good PowerPoint slides, and I put way too much text on everything. So I apologize. But I'm happy to talk with anyone about any of this when we get to the Q&A piece. So right now, I would say we're looking really fully funded through 2021. It's 2022 where we need to start assuming some additional debt issuance if we're going to keep at this pace. And you can see we have a lot sitting in phase 2 to keep going with. So right now, what you'll see in our documentation is we're going to keep moving ahead. I feel like we have pretty solid council direction to keep moving ahead with an aggressive program. We would then need to talk to council in 2021 about the specifics around a debt issuance. And this to me is really important because I do want to make sure we have that conversation when we're ready. So we don't want to carry balances. We don't want to take out funding before we need it. That to me is the time when I feel like we'll know a lot more about, we'll have more design done on some of our phase 2 projects. We'll have better cost estimates, and we'll be ready to have that authorization with the intention of getting those resources into us in 2022. Just also I want to say that we do try to get other kinds of money, and so that does pop up in here. So in phase 1, we had, I think, about $2.2 million in grant funding between 2 projects. In this next budget, we have quite a bit. You'll see the city's money for the Monroe Greenway. It's about $780,000. The bulk of that project is actually federal and state money. So, and we're going to keep doing that. Steve will probably highlight a couple ones where we think we have some good grant opportunity. But when we can, we bring those additional resources into those project budgets to try to stretch our finances, the city resources, as far as we can. So the other thing I just want to state as an intention is we've been pretty diligent. The indexing to CCI is important for the program. It's important to the integrity of the debt issuance we did for the first series. It's our intention to keep it that way. So when we're looking at that next series, we are looking at what the CCI rate increases can sustain. So just want to put that out there moving forward. Again, that'll be part of the analysis we have to do in 2021. But our intention and what you'll see in our documents and what you'll hear from Steve is that we're going to keep going with an integrated program into phase 2.
Good. And just a little bit before we talk about the projects, just back to the rates briefly. So what I put up here are some rate comparisons for fiscal year 21, which would start July 1st. Now this incorporates those rate recommendations that I showed earlier. So this is for an average residential customer, and I do have a follow-up slide that shows the actual impact per utility, but generally the average customer's rate's about $129.21 a month, and it's projected with the increases that we showed there to go up to $131.74 a month.
When you say the rates of what? I can't read what the columns are.
So that would be for the rates for our SAFE and SSMP fees, okay, our water utility, okay, wastewater utility, and stormwater utility.
Okay, and what you're saying is the total average household rate is 124?
The total average residential customer that roughly uses about 6 units of water, would be about $129.21 right now, and okay, then it's projected with those rate recommendations that I showed earlier to go to $131.74.
So the rates for other cities that are up there, is that what they're currently paying or what's proposed for 20? I think it looks like it's proposed for 20.
Those are what they are currently paying.
So we're the 3rd highest in the region, and yet we're one of the lowest in economic scale. I'm not sure I understand how that coordinates to our quality of life, and we're continuing to increase too, so help me out with that.
I think that's a valid point that you make. I think we've taken an approach to aggressively construct infrastructure in our community related to our SAFE program and our stormwater program in particularly.
Right, but those haven't increased as much overall over the last few years, and of course SAFE is just new, as the water, storm, and sewer systems, have increased. I mean, I look at my own bill, and I know, I now do, I make every effort I can to use, instead of 6, what's that initials that you use, how much on the water consumption?
6
CCF.
CCF.
Yeah, thank you. I was using 5, now I'm trying to use 3 to keep my bill down, and yet it continues. It's still going up, but it's because of the other areas in there, and I'm concerned about our citizens that have been here for a long time, that are still here, that are trying to live on blue-collar wages. So I need some help on understanding how that continues to go up and how we're the 3rd highest in the region. That's very surprising to me.
Well, I mean, one thing I see here is the surface water, we're at about $30, and a lot of them are around 10, 12. Is it a major issue here in Milwaukee relative to other communities? Or?
Well, our stormwater fee, so we structured that program back, I think, in 2014, when the city adopted the Stormwater Master Plan. The approach that we took to funding our capital program was a pay-as-you-go structure. So we wanted to, put the money in the bank so we could pay for that infrastructure instead of going out and using debt financing to smooth out the rates. So with our stormwater utility, going back to 2014, there have been increases that have been pretty significant. Generally, they're, in the 9 to 14%. Each of those years going through that, and they vary year to year, but
it compounds pretty fast.
It compounds pretty fast, yes.
I mean, if you look at that, the yellow is that which council voted at the time to take an aggressive,
Yeah, so I can speak to that a little bit since I was on the council at the time. We had a lot of areas in town that were experiencing pretty regular flooding. A lot of property damage was occurring. And nothing in our capital plan at the time was going to address that. And so there were a lot of people that had come and spoken to us about that, and the council decided that we should actually start trying to address those areas that were continuously flooding and actually build the stormwater system that should have been built in the first place, because a lot of those areas were reclaimed wetlands, which means they're geographically situated to flood. And it's why I'm such a stickler about trying to cause development not to occur in places like that. But we're paying the price for somebody drawing lines on a map and saying, yep, that's a lot, when, yep, that was a wetland, and it didn't matter.
So as I hear this discussion, that one is very high because city money is paying 100% of the cost of capital projects. And now we've actually decided to bond, so maybe that needs to be revisited in a way to moderate rates.
Well, and I think there's a couple of points I just want to make tonight. The first one is that last year when we had this discussion, so we actually talked about this last year, knowing that we were going to try and even out and try and lessen the number of high rates. You see that this year. That's actually why you're seeing 0 and 2.5% for most of the things we're looking at. The indexed funds, the ones where we're tying it to the construction, is because we're bonding for those, and we need to make sure we have sufficient revenue to actually pay for those types of programs, or I'm sorry, the actual improvements we're making right now. But this is literally why staff has been looking for ways to bond, partially at the chair's recommendation that we find a way to even some of this out, so you see some debt around exactly what you were saying, Leslie. And then the second thing I wanted to say is there is a portion of this also that we don't control, and I just want to make sure people are aware of that. Not all of it. A good chunk of it is ours.
I'm well aware of it.
Yeah.
But West is a large percentage. If you look at the numbers that we've seen over the last 5-10 years from them, we've also seen those numbers triple. So, and those are a high percentage of the bill. So I want to make sure that we put it in context for what it is and what it isn't. But it is also a concern, and part of why we still have this discussion is because we recognize that one of council's goals is around making sure that people can continue to live in Milwaukee, and that the affordability is something that we're seeing, we're talking about, and we're trying to be really transparent about. So I just wanted to add that to this conversation, but I think it's allowing the city to do some much-needed infrastructure improvements, but there are also costs to that improvement.
The other thing I would also mention is, the comparison is interesting to look at, but, we have to realize that our needs are unique to Milwaukee, and what Oregon City's needs are different. So, we have different infrastructure requirements. That being said, as Ann mentioned, we've tried to propose a rate structure that's going to, try to keep those increases low and try to smooth out those big jumps in some of those things. I do also think it's important to note that I think Washington County actually funds much of some of their transportation infrastructure through property taxes as well. That is not shown on this as part of that rate comparison.
Yeah, and I apologize. I probably should have gotten that and put it on here before today. But so I know for a fact, like Portland has a street fee. I don't see that reflected up here. Washington County has a really aggressive capital program at a county-wide level, their MSTIP. So those are funds that are collected by the county and given back to the cities in the form of projects. And so I believe if I put those on here, just on the transportation ones, I know a little bit more about that they would look quite a bit different. Just to the way that they, as a county-wide, resource those things. So I think if we do a refresh of this slide, if I could add the transportation elements, at least that would probably show you a little bit of a different story.
And I'd actually ask that we do that when we come back to council during the budget cycle. So when we do the presentation of the CIP and we talk about those numbers, it'd be good to have the updated slide.
And to John's point about how the stormwater looks so low for most cities, I don't know what the cities themselves, what discussions they may be having, but I can tell you from sitting on the Watershed Council that Oak Lodge is looking at some pretty significant increases in their stormwater fees. They're going through a stormwater master planning right now, and I think they're going to see a fairly significant jump there. They're not a city, so they're not going to be on this chart, but I think a lot of places have, my sense is, have not recognized what they need to invest to have.
Well, and I think similarly, I think, Milwaukee's in a very different position than a place like Wilsonville, or Happy Valley, where, a lot of our development happened a long time ago, and none of this stormwater, this is to the mayor's point, right. There is no system, right? There's no stormwater actually treatment, anywhere on site in the majority of our neighborhoods. We're now having to sort of pay that at the rear end, whereas in other cities like Wilsonville, that are developing currently have, stormwater treatment systems that are being built by SDCs, by current development and rates going forward. So, we're fixing a problem in an existing environment where a lot of these cities have a completely different scenario. We all have to participate in treating the water on site, even the homes that are existing like mine, that have no stormwater treatment on site.
Perhaps one of the things we may look at, to whatever extent we can in the future, is what is the level at which a person can receive financial assistance or reduction or whatever. Is it 50% of the poverty level? Is it 80%? Is it 30%? What is it? And how do people qualify for that and get the word out more to them, because.
Well, and we
Right
had
now,
that
we're-
discussion last year as well. And it is something that Bonnie and Peter and Steve and I have all had as a discussion again this year to make sure that we're getting the information to the people who need it the most. One of the places where we do struggle a bit is that for renters, it's often captured within their rental rates. And so it's hard for us to actually reach the individuals who qualify. I think it's an ongoing concern for staff, and I think it's something that, yes, you should continue to hold us to.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I think it's an ongoing concern for our community and our residents.
Absolutely.
So, thank you. I have a different question, but I'm not sure if I may. It occurred to me also as we were going through, not this, but the information before, I believe, that as far as monies coming in from other sources and from sources in total, there's also going to be money coming in from the county's increase in vehicle registration fee. So where would that be used or budgeted? And would it be budgeted in our next biennial budget, which we knew we couldn't now because it just barely passed, but how does that factor in, and are the CIP projects something that we can use that money for?
Yes, and the money has already been allocated to several CIP projects looking over the next couple, 3 years. The county tells me they've been collecting the fees since renewals started around late November, December for the January renewal period. And last I heard, they were anticipating on distributing the fees quarterly. I have not heard anything since early January on that, so I'm not sure exactly when we'll see the first check come in. But we have several capital projects where we've already anticipated the revenues. I think I forget, it was resolution or ordinance the county passed. It anticipated something in the low 400,000 a year for a city our size, and that's kind of what we budgeted for our projects looking ahead.
Okay, great, thank you.
I have a question on your chart again. Just to clarify, some of the colored bars are rates that the city of Milwaukee controls, and some of them we don't, right?
The purple we don't.
The purple we don't control to some extent because there's a treatment component that for the wastewater.
Right.
So
That's on a per unit basis.
that's on a per unit basis.
Okay.
But that's an expense that's one of the revenue, it's part of our revenue requirement to operate our wastewater utility. So we capture those costs in our rates, the treatment costs. And those are roughly like $5.5 million a year of the wastewater utility.
And are they going up also?
They are forecasted to go up roughly, I think, about 5% over the next 10 years. I mean, annually.
5% per year?
5% per year, I think, is what Wes has indicated.
I think it would be helpful to figure out a way to annotate that in some way, if not on that chart, in some footnote or something.
Sure.
Because, it's, I have a long history with the wastewater rates.
Yes.
And I would like to have that noted.
And have they settled them, or are they still?
No, I think that we have another conversation before there's a final recommendation that goes to the BCC, but.
To circle back along the surface water concerns that were mentioned earlier, one thing I have initiated is we have a current contract recently signed to have a company go out and do infiltration testing around the city, so I have a better idea of what areas could infiltrate stormwater without increasing the pipes or increasing the pipe sizes. So that's going to start any week, and it'll go on till early April. And I hope to use that information to help design future projects and in areas where we do have fairly high infiltration rates. And some initial scattered studies show we can infiltrate as much as 20 inches of rain an hour in some of our dry wells. And in those areas, mostly they're near Safeway and the top of the hill. The higher parts of the city have kind of a sandy lens underneath there. But that hopefully will I'm hoping to eliminate some stormwater master plan projects by infiltrating the water directly into the ground.
Thank you.
And then I had the rate comparison for 21-22, the follow-on year. So the increases there are roughly from 134.74 to about 135.14. And then here's really sort of the impact per utility, so you can see what those costs are. And on the far right of the slide are the July 1st, 2020 and the July 1st, 2021. So the monthly impact for the average customer per month would be about $2.52 for the upcoming year. And then the follow-on year, an additional $3.40 per month. So when we do the rate design for the water and the wastewater utilities, as I mentioned earlier, there's some things that we can do to reduce some of the impacts to some of the customers that don't use a lot of water, like as we did last year, and that's the intent to do that. So we'll reduce that impact. So that may, what probably will end up to recover those revenues we'll need to increase some of the fixed customer charges for our larger customers. So both on the water and the wastewater, we'll be putting something together to do that. Any questions on it?
Is it possible to get you to email the PowerPoint slides to us?
Sure.
Thank you.
I guess
I don't think that fast. I like to look at stuff.
just thinking about the stormwater system and financing it and thinking about what's likely to happen to our stormwater system over the coming years, that it's going to be more taxed, and I don't mean financially. Are we setting ourselves up to be in a deeper hole financially with the stormwater system by sort of pushing the financing for what we're building now down the road and then discovering that we're going to have to actually indeed build more or enlarge pipes or create more treatment?
Well, I think there's a couple things there. As Steve mentioned, one of the things we're looking at doing is, are there ways to reduce some of the hard infrastructure that we're building that will reduce costs? But then, we're also working with a master plan that's starting to become dated, and there are certainly some projects and assumptions that were made in that master plan that may not that probably we can relook at again, and there's probably some projects in there that may not be necessary. And Steve and I have been talking about at least one project that, depending on how Meek Street works out and modeling the stormwater flow from that there may be another project that's not necessary anymore. And Steve, I'm sure, can talk some more about that.
Okay.
I just will add, I think there's a couple different, yes, they're in the update, what forecasting assumptions we should be using and making sure they're best practices and realistic. And I agree, we wouldn't want to dig ourselves into a future hole. I also think in the last plan, I'm not sure we really fully recognize the benefit of like green streets and the fact that we would have this integrated sidewalk program that could do focused on-site treatment as well. So we didn't really have that. I think there's an opportunity to capture some of that, like what Steve was doing with the perk testing, and where can we do treatment that we really weren't considering. I think so we have this interesting kind of blended approach right now where we still have some very large stormwater projects that need to move ahead and advance. Meek is one you'll hear about, and then we're also looking to better integrate it with all the other work that we're doing. So I think a refresh could find both those.
Cool.
One thing to mention too is development occurs. Current guidelines require you to retain, detain as much as possible on site as part of our MS4 permit. So I don't foresee an increase in stormwater leaving if it's being properly retained and detained by the future development. The only site that I know we can't do that on is the Monroe Apartments because we can't infiltrate that, so that will end up in a storm pipe somewhere.
Yeah, I was thinking less about future development as I was about extremity of storms.
Yes, there is not exactly good data on if we're going to, there's a lot of talk out there about the intensity of storms increasing with the warming climate. And yes, and I don't know of any recent data done in the Portland metro area to determine what we could be seeing as a future 10, 25, or 50-year event. But I know there is concern on that.
Thanks.
Okay, so this is a slide showing the current and immediately upcoming projects we have in the pipeline. So those items in red up there are what are under construction or soon to be under construction in the next 6 months. We have several major improvements going on. Currently, McBride has a contract out. They should mow, I would assume, next month and start work. We also, Omark Drive is the tail end of the 2019 SSMP project, and that will go under construction again in probably the March-April time frame. We expect to go out for contracts with River Road and 22nd Avenue Safe. That's at 90% plans right now. We should get a contract out on that again in the April timeframe. Linwood Avenue Safe, probably in the May. 43rd Avenue, Howe Street, and 42nd I've tied together. That'll probably go out for bid in about August, maybe September. Lake Road, we're fast tracking that. I should have mentioned that earlier. We hope to get that out to bid again in late March or April. So lots of work going on this summer. I also highlighted a few of the private developments that we also anticipate to kick off here in the next year. And then looking ahead to next season and beyond that, items in the light blue are what we're looking to start designing this summer, this fall, and get under construction next summer. So we do have quite a bit happening right now in SAFE, SSMP, Storm, and the sanitary is primarily up at the Waverly. With the clay pipe replacement, there's about $2 million, a little over $2 million up there for the sanitary work.
Excellent.
And again, this is just a quick summary of the main projects we're kicking off this year. Kind of talks about what we're doing with each. Several are adding sidewalks. I mentioned this a lot of that meetings that I've had recently. McBride's adding, replacing the water and doing some storm work, adding a sidewalk and rebuilding the street. Lake Road, we're going to rebuild the entire street section going down to the base and bring it all up with new base rock material, new asphalt, adding width to create 2 bike lanes, and we'll be repairing a little bit of sidewalk where possible. We don't have the money to repair all the sidewalk or add additional sidewalk to that. The Meeks stormwater pipe south face, that went out to bid and came back last week, and we expect that project to start again probably late next month, and that will be wrapped up by the fall. That's needed to provide service to the Monroe Apartments, give that development a place to drain their stormwater to. Linwood Avenue reconstruction, council is very familiar with that. I had a presentation on that a couple of months ago, but that is adding 2 10-foot multi-use paths, one on the east side, one on the west side of that street. And that'll take about 2 seasons to construct. And the street there will actually get narrower than what you see today. Right now it's a 28 plus or minus foot wide street, and when we get done it'll be about a 22-foot wide street, and then bikes and peds will be totally off the street. River Road 22nd, again, that'll go out to bid real soon. That's adding a sidewalk on the west side of 22nd and the east side of River Road and overlaying the streets. 43rd Avenue, again, is adding a 10-foot multi-use path on the west side of that street. We chose the west side because the street itself is off-centered in the right-of-way, and to move the street into the center would cost an absorbent amount of money, so we're going to leave the street where it is and kind of build around it as best we can. And with that, we're going to do some improvements to 42nd Avenue for ADA. There were some mistakes made the last time there's work done there. And then 42nd, still a lot of concerns by the NDA about traffic moving too fast. So we're going to try some ideas to encourage people to go slower on that street. But those are the main projects we have going this year, about $15 million being kicked off.
What is a Sharrow?
A Sharrow is a symbol on the road that gives the bike the legal right to ride in the travelway.
Multi-lane marking.
Yeah, it's the double chevron with the bike. That is a Sharrow marking, yes.
It's not on this list. I think it was for the next phase. It had Stanley from somewhere to Railroad. I forget which street it ran.
Yeah, it goes from Lloyd down to Railroad, yes.
Is that the Greenway build-out, or is that just repaving?
That is a SAFE project, I believe. Or is it SSMP? I forget. Look, SSMP, sorry.
So it is just repave?
Yeah, repave.
It's the part from King down to Railroad?
Not King.
From Lloyd.
Lloyd.
Is what the master plan had it from Lloyd down to Railroad.
Where's Lloyd?
It is west of Monroe. Right?
Yeah, it lies, it's
About midway between.
midway between Railroad and Monroe. I think it's probably a pretty accurate way. You'll see on another slide coming, I have it kind of highlighted. So the Waverly Heights wastewater configuration, we're going to go out and hire a consultant to help us figure out what to do up here. This is in a very interesting neighborhood in that the roads that are there aren't public right-of-way, and there actually is some question as to who controls the main road, because our old plats indicate it's the Waverly Golf Club, and the Waverly Golf Club says, oh, no, we don't. So,
Is Waverly in Milwaukee?
Mm-hmm. The golf club isn't, but everything this side of it is.
Yeah, these homes on the south side. So this is all Milwaukee, and this existing sanitary sewer runs through a lot of backyards, and it's going to be very interesting how to upgrade it, because it's a clay pipe that's broken. It infiltrates quite readily and creates lots of problems.
So this is both the single-family homes and the apartment complexes this serves, or is this just the single-family homes?
Single-family homes is where mostly where the sanitary line goes along lot lines and stuff. And so we haven't done any initial testing. My gut feeling is that it's a hill there for a reason, probably because there's some basalt rock underneath it, otherwise it would have been worn away flat by now. And so to move the pipe out into a street, we might hit weathered basalt, but we'll do some geotech testing to find out. My gut feeling, might be better to leave the pipe in the backyards and do pipe bursting technology between manhole and manhole, because there's very few laterals connecting on. There's just very few homes. That might be the best option. But again, we're going to hire a consultant and do a little bit of testing up there and kind of come up with a plan of attack.
Yeah, that seems like that's the idea too, assuming the volume is sufficient to do it.
Yeah, Assistant City Engineer Jen Garbely has stepped up to handle that, and so she has a nice touch with people.
You guys always throw her the hard ones, don't you?
Okay. Well, she's had two really soft, pretty ones. She's had the Plaza and she's had Kronberg Parks, and now she has to step up to the plate, take a little tougher.
Kronberg was not easy. She was building a bridge on a dump.
Well, but you didn't have people complaining all the time.
People are pretty happy about it.
That's a big difference.
I don't want to take us too far off track, but I just don't know what this really illustrates for us. I mean, are the arrows just basic? Are the arrows
It's just
flows?
the direction of flow for the wastewater. Yeah.
And is this the last of our clay pipes? I thought.
Significant clay pipe, the last of any. Yeah.
And the red outline
Is the border.
is just
It's that
the
service area, the neighborhood.
border? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, not the neighborhood, but the subdivision.
That subdivision, yeah.
Okay.
All right, this is a very busy slide. This shows kind of where we've been, where we are, and where we're going with SAFE and SSMP projects. So again, all the blue up there are SSMPs that were completed in the 2018-19 fiscal year.
Do all the new members know what SSMP is?
Did it one time.
Street surface maintenance, so it's paving, basically.
Yeah, a lot of what you see up here in blue is an overlay. So a lot of times we'll go through and we'll grind off a bit of the existing asphalt and put fresh asphalt down on top. We can only do that in areas where the asphalt is in decent enough condition. Sometimes it's so poorly, it's too old, it hasn't been maintained properly for decades, and so in some areas you had to do a complete rebuild of the asphalt street, and that's what we did along Ardenwald, so 39th and Wake Street up by Ardenwald was a complete full-depth rebuild of those streets. And Omark's the same way, and Lake Road will be the same way. And as I get more familiar with the projects going in the future, we'll have to determine which ones we can do a grind and overlay on and which ones are full-depth rebuild. The advantage of a grind and overlay, you get about 10 times more street for the same dollar as you do for a full depth. So it's extremely expensive to go in and refurbish the street.
Steve, just so that I am also clear, this is not our slurry seals, is that correct?
No slurry seals here. This is just asphalt and
Thanks.
Yeah, the more expensive projects.
So how does the decision get made as to what you're going to do? I'm asking in terms of, I'm very familiar with Logos Road because I live on it, and it is a very narrow road. Will it only be a repaving, or will it be more than that?
Logos is just, let me check here.
Isn't Logos supposed to get sidewalks all the way eventually?
Well, Logos has sidewalks from 49th to Stanley. It has none from 49th to 43rd. And it's very narrow. I mean, it's only about maybe 20 feet wide.
Okay. So the master plan has Logos slated for both sidewalks and street reconstruction. And so once we get into it more, we'll decide. My guess, by looking at the number here, 180,000 for SAFE. It's probably a sidewalk on one side only, but I don't know. I'll have to look at it closer and see what we're doing. But as far as what determines whether we're going to grind and overlay or whether a complete street rebuild, every few years we have a survey done of the city streets called PCI, Pavement Condition Index, and it gives it a number. So a brand new paved street is given 100, and from there it goes down to dirt, which is 0. And you have various ranges, and generally, and for each classification street, the ranges change a little bit. So arterial, collectors, and locals all have slightly different ranges where they go from good to fair to poor. And once it gets past a certain range, you're basically throwing money away to do a grind and overlay. And right now, we're doing pretty good on our collectors and the arterials of the city. We made a commitment several years ago to maintain those, and those have been maintained in a good condition or better. And our residential streets, about 1/3 of our residential streets are in need of rebuild total. They have kind of deteriorated to the point that they need to rebuild in. As I mentioned to people in August, we don't have sufficient funds to rebuild all those streets. So I'm not sure what the process will be going forward, but we can discuss more and try to figure out what we're going to do. Right now, I don't have an answer. Do you have a question?
No, I just said thank you.
Oh, okay, all right. And so looking at this year's, the phase one projects, the purple shows you what we got done last year, the Ardenwall Safe, the Sellwood, Madison, and a little piece of safe on Washington where it passes between 21st and McLaughlin. Was done when the Axle Tree and South Downtown improvements were done, and we got the Kronberg Trail built. So those are the 4 main projects completed. Looking at next year, a lot of the ones are the same projects I just got done talking about, so they'll be going on. The following year, 21-22, you can see where we're going with the black ones, or what we anticipate getting underway that year. And then the money pot runs dry, and phase 2 projects are shown there. That will be over the following 3 years, providing funding is provided. We do hope to get a lot of the phase 2 projects under design or pretty close to fully designed in the next year and a half.
So that gets back to Kelly's point that we need to raise some money at some point.
Yeah, so this is what my assumption is. We're going to show these projects as funded, assuming a debt issuance in 2022. So that, I mean, things could change between now and then, and we could get different direction. But for now, we were given direction to do a 9-year program. We're still moving down that path. This is what we're going to do, but that will require a subsequent conversation with council, and then a debt issuance for 2022.
And when are you bringing that to council?
2021, and I don't know exactly when yet. So I am just trying to be, I'm a little more, I feel like my responsibility, always, but to all of you in particular, is I want to be good steward of the resources that we have and the accounts that we have now. We have really great plans, particularly with the SAFE being so recent. We know what we've been charged with to do. We're trying to go out and do it, and we want to make sure that the next time we do the debt issuance, that I have the best possible cost estimates, and that I have a really good sense of what our spend down, like the timing of it, so that we get it at the right time. So that's why I can't be a little more committal on the timing, but I don't see any way we don't do it. We don't need those resources in 2022. It's just when in 2021 we bring it to you.
Yep.
I think the other piece of this, I just want to make sure everybody is understands, is if you have concerns, today would be a great day to know. We're assuming there's no concerns, so we're building the budget. There's 2 parts of this. One is the bond issuance. The second is the personnel and the staffing levels. So we are putting into the staffing levels the same levels that we've had for the last couple of years to make sure that we have sufficient engineering support in order to deliver this process. So as much as we're not coming to you for a vote right now, please make it transparent to all of us at some point if you feel like you have concerns about us going out and taking on the debt. Okay? Thanks.
I just pass around a more detailed spreadsheets showing the cost of projects done to date and where we're going. So the ones on the upper part of the page are pretty much locked in, either costs that we've actually spent or costs that we anticipate will be spent based on either a contract or a pretty focused engineer's estimate for several projects. Then when you get down to Harvey, you start seeing things getting a lot softer. I have a % increase there. I use 5% per year increase. Again, it's a crystal ball. I don't know where the cost index is going. I do know for the first time that when I looked at the Seattle cost index, starting fourth quarter of 2018, there's a Portland cost index separate, and we're about a half point higher than Seattle for that first fiscal year done. So between the fourth quarter of 2018 and fourth quarter of 2019, we were a full 0.5% ahead of Seattle as far as our cost index here, which is not good news, but at least we have a more accurate number to work with.
I don't know where that is.
So this column with the percentages, this is like the cumulative increase in cost as you go through time, as we get further out, the percentages go up.
Yeah, it's adding 5% per year, so that's why you see it down here at 140%, and you get down to the bottom, because I'm assuming that it's going to continue. Now, if we do hit a recession and costs kind of back down a little bit, then those numbers will be lower. But I'd rather estimate what I consider on the high end and not spend the money than estimate low and run out of money.
So are these cost estimates ones that were done when we started SAFE, or
Yes.
you guys have fine-tuned them?
I have not had a chance to go back and fine tune them. Those were the cost estimates that the engineering director, Eaton, and his staff put together 2 years ago.
And the ones that are completed at the top, you didn't give us the cost estimates, so how close were we?
Ardenwald came in under. It was, cost estimate was about 260, 270. Selwood came in high. Its cost estimate was about 300. It almost doubled. Kronberg Park, it's hard to say because that changed as the grant came in, and the cost estimate was real low. Then as the grant came in, it went really high, and so it was a hard one to judge. And again, South Downtown and Plaza, that's higher than what we had anticipated. But again,
it changed.
It changed.
It changed.
SSMP 2018 is a little bit lower than what we anticipated, but I think some projects got dropped off. That is why it dropped. I saw the initial work, and then when it came out, there was a couple, 3 streets dropped off of it, and that's why that cost savings occurred. SSMP 2019 came in almost exactly on estimate.
These are absolutely just paper exercise estimate. For the ones that we haven't gone into design on, don't be attached to them. Because it was really, it was just an exercise that Chuck went through to try to program different projects into different years. And so most of what you saw in the CIP last year was like there were some individual projects, but there was also like SAFE, and then SSMP, and then all these projects were kind of in there. And so we're trying to be a little more transparent with you. I'll show you a little bit more of what's kind of behind the curtain here. But also
Eyes are glazing over.
Yeah, your eyes. Yeah, so we may have given too much, but just know that is part of why I'm saying I want this next year to initiate design on some of these next pieces, so that we're not working off these planning level estimates, because we have run into. In general, it is more expensive to construct these projects than originally estimated. Where we can, we've brought in additional grant resources to offset those increases, or we have made we've made design decisions to reduce the cost, to try to make them fit within the resources that we have.
So what I don't see in here, and I know they're part of some of the projects at least, is the Greenway, the stormwater portion. So is that both subtracted and added out so it's invisible?
It's invisible. It's columns to the right of this. I was just focusing on SAFE and SSMP right now, but there are a lot of storm and sanitary and water components. The one thing I'm also trying to do is bundle projects together as best possible, not have a lot of small little projects. And what I haven't fully done yet is look at all the little pieces. I got a nice, better, more complicated map than that on my computer that kind of shows where sanitary, storm, and water all is. And it gives me an idea of where I need to get the sanitary, water, and storm done first before I go put a new street in. So I'm going to bundle them, and then I'm also going to try to bundle streets that are similar. As an example here, I've already made the decision, as you mentioned, 42nd and 43rd Howe will all be as one bid project. Edison, Home, and Wood will all be as one bid project. They're all fairly similar. That'll go out. I can see doing the Park, Lloyd, Stanley as one thing, because it's a similar area, and then any others, other utility projects in that area, because you get a definite cost savings to scale if you can put out a single $2 to $5 million project over 5 $1 million projects. So I am still working on that.
So I don't really want to ask this question, but if we are feeling like we're coming in above our cost estimates, and on these SAFE projects in particular, we set this really aggressive timeline. Is it realistic to think that we can really do this work within a 9-year span? And yeah, can we do this?
I'll do this one.
Because Steve shrank
he's like
from
that.
this.
Steve's answer would be, this is really aggressive. This is a lot of projects. I don't know if you've seen the map. That's a lot of projects up there. And I think I'm feeling like Phase 2, there's a path, and I can see what it is. I can't swear you a blood oath right now that every single one of those, we even had one project shift out of Phase 1, and that was King. So I have had one shift, but that's a pretty good rate, I think, but Phase 3 gets really aggressive. That's where it starts to assume, the list gets quite a bit longer. So I think we might have to talk as we're moving from 2 to 3 about what really is in Phase 3. And I do think we probably need to be real upfront and honest about, okay, that's still a long list for Phase 2. But for now, I don't know. I think we've been given the charge, and we're trying to charge ahead to the best of our ability, and we'll see how much. This team is a great team. It's still a new team, and what these efficiencies that like Steve's figuring out in terms of the bundling of the projects and just the expertise that we're building on our staff, we've basically had to reorganize the entire department into a pretty substantial project delivery unit, which is not what the city was doing. And so I've been really impressed with how far we've come, but I probably would need to say that Phase 3 for me is where I start getting kind of nervous, and that list is starting to look too long. So how do we want to grapple with that?
Yeah, this summer will be a good test for us, having the 6 big projects go out. We've never had this much work. What I'm told, we've had it. It's been a while. I don't know. You've been here longer than I have. This is from my background of Wilsonville. This is a lot for Wilsonville, but then here we are here, and we have a good staff. We have talented young engineers, and I've told the civil engineers that they'll be out on their projects doing inspections sometimes. We don't have enough inspectors. If we get really busy days, they'll be busy, and we may not cover everything. And so I think between everybody, I think we can handle it. I'd rather not have my civils out all the time, because I like to get them using in the summertime, designing next year's projects. And if they're out in the field too much, it's going to put a stress on getting next year's projects done. So it'll be a good test, and hopefully we come through fine. But yes, that third year is brutal. That third phase is brutal.
I'm just thinking of Jen and 7 poor Jen from this winter already, and wondering how much we can ask of our staff. That's all. Because you guys have been going full tilt for a while here. So.
Yes, we have. We have just recently hired a new engineering tech to replace Jennifer Backus in her Tech 1 position. And then Jennifer Backus tomorrow flies to a conference to become a 4-day training course in how to do capital project inspection and asphalt and everything else there. And she comes back from that, I plan to start, again, fine-tuning her and training her more here on how to do the capital project inspection. She's very excited by it. Alex will also step into a role more of capital project work. So hopefully we're hit the ground running. And then Tessie did really well last summer doing it, and all of the civils are going to a construction management course being offered by APWA, and so they'll have a more in-depth knowledge of how to manage their projects and how to deliver the product and watch for cost overruns and everything. So all that's being planned too right now.
Well, I'll just say, all the projects are great and important projects, but I'm particularly excited to see Linwood and Lake Road going forward this year, because those are 2 that, have been cried for as long as I've been on city council.
43rd Avenue.
Well, that one.
I'm dodging people carrying their groceries, walking on the road.
Yep.
Big improvement.
I guess I appreciate you looking out for staff, but I think we definitely want to show people what they're paying for, and so this is going to feel like a lot. I'm still hearing people say, I'm excited about that. I'm glad Linwood Lake, I'm glad 43rd is happening. We'll have to see how people feel.
When it's under construction.
In 4 years, their enthusiasm level is, that'll be another conversation we have to have too, because this is a lot to ask of our community as well, this level of construction, so.
Well, I think it's, South Downtown was so concentrated, but this is a little bit more shared pain, yeah.
Well, I'm very pleased with the quality of the staff presentation. I'm also very pleased that the rate increases are coming in very modest, 2.5%, 3.5%. The idea of taking on some debt financing in the stormwater area to keep those rate increases down. I'm very pleased with what I saw tonight. I'd like to thank the members of the CUAB for sitting in on this, and look forward to getting some of these projects completed.
There's still.
I got a couple more for you. Sorry. So I've got several water projects that I wanted to update everybody on that are related to our production, treatment, and storage of our water. So we have some significant investments going on that side of the water, outside the distribution system. I think last fall I gave you a presentation or some information on our well number 2 project. So this one's taken us a little bit longer, but I think there's really some good news here with well number 2. So, the phase 1 of that project was to drill the well, and we successfully drilled the well and developed the well and found out we actually have some additional capacity for the well. So, we went from roughly 380 gallons per minute that well was going to be able to provide to close to 600 gallons per minute. Wow. So that's a significant increase.
And is that the well on the 40th and Harvey property?
Currently it's in the long white building on 40th and Harvey. Mm-hmm. So we've got well number 2 in that building right now, and that's the one that's got the cracked casing. And then we have well number 3 that's down on 40th and Harvey also, and then well number 5 down in the park. So, and then there's an older well number 1 that's there that was abandoned and no longer in use. One of the things we've also done there is we've sort of aggregated our water rights for those 4 wells, and we actually have some more flexibility on how we're going to be able to use those wells in the future. So I think roughly altogether we've got about 1,080 gallons per minute of water from those 3 wells that we'll be able to use and manage. So with the increasing capacity, what we decided to do was actually change how we're going to pump the water from that well. Originally, we were going to use the old pump that was in current well number 2, but that wouldn't allow us to use that extra capacity. The pump just wasn't able to pump that much. So we've gone back and are going to put in a larger pump in that well, and we've made some changes to how that pump turns on, off and on. We're going to add what's a variable frequency drive that allows us to ramp up the pump from 0 up to 600. We do have right now, we can't always, 600 is really sort of the max that we can put through one of those treatment towers. So we don't want to go beyond that. In an 8-hour day, we can actually pump a little bit more than 600 gallons per minute, but there's some drawdown in the well. So we're going to add, like I said, a different pump in there. And the next phase of that project is putting in the process pumping, or the process piping, the pump, and the building over the current well. We're right now, the design package, the plans and specs are supposed to be going to OHA for their review. It's one of the things that they took a look at. And then I expect to go out for bids in late March or early April, anticipating the completion of that component to be in the winter of 2021. So December, January of this year, or coming up the next year. And then we also, as part of that project, need to abandon the existing well number 2. That construction phase is roughly $525,000 is what we're looking at. And our phase 1 of the project, we ended up actually coming in about $33,000 under budget. So that's a good project. We're excited about that one. The next project is our reservoir project. So we've got a project to fully rehabilitate this tank. It's about a $2.6 million project with contingency. So we're going to remove the coating from the exterior and interior. There's some seismic improvements that we're going to make to address some deficiencies. So over the fall, we did some additional analysis on the seismic condition of that tank. And what we noticed, or what we found out, is for the amount of water that we store in the tank, it's about 30 feet at the top water level. If there's a seismic event, the slosh of that water, there's not enough freeboard, so it would damage the rafters in the tank and collapse the tank. So what we've had to do is reduce by about 5 feet in the tank of what we can store. And we're still in good condition in terms of our storage. And then we looked at a couple different options there on what we could do to fix that. So one of the things we need to also do related to that is provide some additional flexible connections to where the pipe connects to the tank, and then make some improvements to the interior I-beam inside, the ring and the rafters. There's some deficiencies. Some of them are twisted a little bit, so we're going to make some improvements to those. And then we also looked at what would we need to do to regain that 5 feet of capacity to the tank. So it's about a fifth of the tank's capacity. We would need to raise the tank by about 5 feet. So one of the options was to build the new tank, which would be about $7 million. The other option is to cut the top of the tank and then add like an aluminum top to it that provides that additional freeboard. That's going to be a future project down the road. So right now, based on it'll be captured in our master plan documents. Based on our storage needs right now, we're just going to maintain that level so we don't have to do that improvement at this time, because it would be significant. That would be a significant cost also, probably about another $1 million to add that roof there. And then the other thing that we need to still do is model what happens when we take that reservoir offline, how we're going to manage the system. So the reservoir will be offline for probably about 90 days in sort of that fall-winter time frame. We need the reservoir during the summer because there's more demand, water demand. But that also increases, because we're doing it in the winter, and fall and winter increases the cost, because then it has to be fully enrobed and heated. I'm expecting to bid this project sort of the later part of the spring, with construction in the fall of this year. And then that schedule certainly is dependent upon contractors' availability. Painting contractors, there are limited amounts of those, and sometimes they're hard to get on their schedule. So if for some reason we're not able to do this in the fall of 20, we'll do it in the fall of 21 if we don't get a good price and a contractor availability. And then the other big project that we have is our SCADA system. So the SCADA, that's an acronym for Supervisory Control and Automated Data Acquisition. And it's the computer system that we use to automate our treatment and pumping of water and delivery out into our distribution system. So we don't have to manually turn valves and turn on buttons on the pumps just to pump out water into the system. So the system, the SCADA system that we have is a very vintage system. It was constructed in the mid to late 90s. And we haven't had any significant upgrades to that system. We're starting to see some issues with how the system communicates back to the desktop workstations. We're starting to see communication errors. We're starting to see some degradation in some of the programmable logic controllers that help us control the system. We're starting to see some problems there, and so we need to do some work there. So we just recently awarded a contract for the design services and the SCADA application development in January to Tetra Tech for about $470,000. So that seems like it's a big number, but a lot of that is actually developing the integrated control narratives of how we want the system to operate and function when we put everything back in place. And while we're building this system, we're going to continue to operate the old SCADA system. So they'll be building it sort of side by side to do that. There's a communications infrastructure component to that that's roughly in about $240,000 range. That includes a cellular piece, so we have some radio cellular communications, but also building some fiber network out to some of the sites. We've been working with our IT department on that. And then there's the field automation construction piece. So this is the part where we're going in to all the different plants and remote sites, and we're putting in the new components, these new programmable logic controllers, those things that we need to operate the system. And that's roughly about $300,000. And then there's a construction management component of that as well. Total price is about, almost $1.2 million.
So is this system connected to the internet?
It is not connected to the internet. A big part of this is also cybersecurity. So that is a big part of this project.
And you said water. It's just the water system, or is it also wastewater?
It's also our wastewater. So this is how we operate our pump stations, wastewater pump stations that we have as well. So here's our project timeline that we have right now. So we've got a kickoff meeting actually starting next week with the design team. It'll be a pretty intensive week. We've got a group of coming from Tetra Tech to sit with our field crew and go out to the various different sites and start to determine how we want these things to function. I anticipate having the design and the specifications development completed by October, and then hopefully awarding a contract in December. And then in June, we'll be piloting the new system to make sure everything's working properly, that it's doing the things that we want it to do. And then we will transition from the older system to the new system probably July of next year. So there's a lot of parts to this project, but it's a critical part of our water infrastructure. Any questions on those? Thanks.
We don't know enough to ask questions.
Was this too much? Did we go too far? Yeah.
Developed a modification of existing software that other cities use? Would that be a way of characterizing it?
So there's various software platforms that you can use. We're going to use one that's a little more simpler and more. There are people out there that can help troubleshoot things a little bit more easier than the system that we have right now. Yeah. Is that?
Yes.
So
For, once it goes online, is it software that will be like managed and maintained by internal IT, or is there like a maintenance contract we'll have with an outside firm?
So our water distribution crew and our water quality coordinator and our IT will, for the most part, manage the sort of the backups of the system. There's always subscription fees with software that you purchase, so there will be like a subscription fee that's associated with the software that we end up using. One of the things that we didn't do a good job doing was maintaining the subscription on the software that we currently have to make sure that we were upgrading and keeping the most updated software. You know, we're sort of like using Windows 95 right now, right? I mean, that would be the comparison, but that's one of the things that we want to do as we go into the future is make sure that we're updating those subscriptions and keeping that software updated.
But we also do have technical contracts with the companies that run these, and actually we just re-upped one with our current because it helps us. They're usually faster at solving the problem than if we try and do it without them. And so what we found even this last month is that we were able to quickly address a problem that would have taken our team far longer if we didn't have somebody to call. But just a huge shout out to the staff we do have working on this. They're doing an incredible job. We lost the gentleman who did this for how many, 25 years?
Yeah.
Last year. So we have a new team that's also picking this up, and so we wanted to make sure that they had full support. I think the only thing that I wanted to add tonight, based on, since we already closed out the conversation, is that we will be bringing this, when we go into the budget process, we are not going to have a separate CIP section for this. What we'll do is when Peter comes in to talk about his budget, he'll talk about these in a very general term, since we've gone into detail tonight. But if you have anything at that point that you want to talk about in the project, you can bring it up then as well. It's just going to be brief. Mm-hmm. It.
And going back to the financials, if we have any more detailed questions, we can just send Bonnie an email.
Yeah, send them my way.
And then didn't you have something I've forgotten what it was.
I had offered to talk about any capital projects or any major projects generally that are going on in the
City Hall, weren't you? I thought there was a City Hall discussion that we were postponing until the end of the meeting.
Well, the City Hall one is done. I mean, I think it's just a general update that we'll be back. We'll be letting the debt in June 23rd. We actually already received support from the Budget Committee on that, and we received council support. So I'm not planning on bringing anything back on that item. But if there are any other, my goal here was really, are there projects that we didn't talk about as that, or is the CIP that you wanted an update on? I'm happy to talk about anything else.
What about the existing building?
The existing building, this weekend, counselors got together and interviewed a number of candidates who are going to be sitting on our Blue Ribbon Task Force to talk about what the policy priorities are for this facility. That is going to be, I think we said, a 6-month process to talk about just how this building should be used in the future, knowing the restraint or constraints we have on the project based on budget and other items. So we will have an update from that group, I'm hoping this fall, and that gives us enough time to start planning the long-term use of this building. We don't move for 2.5 years, so we still have some buffer time to figure out that use. But we'd like to hear from the community before we really make any determination on that.
You don't just pack up and move down the street in a week or something?
Well, if you would like to buy a building off of us with historical issues, you're welcome to take that on. But, this is a beautiful building, and it is a long-standing identity of this community. We value that. We think it's an important discussion that is bigger than the staff. It's bigger than just the city council. And we want to make sure that the feedback comes from the community that's loved it and been a part of it. So I don't know what the answer is. And it's hard for some people to believe that I'm actually walking into this without knowing, but I think that it would be disingenuous if we came to the table with any concepts about what the use would be.
So in terms of the debt we're taking out, the city was going to sell 2 properties? Where do those things stand?
Sure, so one of those is the Pond House. We did receive bids, and we did receive qualifying bids. So the staff is working on that right now, but we are expecting that will be concluded and that we will sell that property. The Burtman House is the second one. We've run into some questions, and I think Peter and I are trying to get through those questions, but we are continuing down that path to determine what the difficulties are with segregating that parcel, because it is multiple pieces that are tied together, and making sure that we do it in a way that works long-term for the new user and for us. So I'll know more about that, I'm hoping, in the next couple months, but we don't have an answer there right now. The places where we're looking to pull from for the down payment are the Pond House. We had money set aside for this building, so that's another $500,000 that we are pulling out to put towards that purchase. That was for the bay and for changes for engineering. We also have money from the library that was under expend. So we put extra money in last year to make sure that we could complete the project. We ended up with savings from that as well. I can't give you the number today because we are still making payments, but it's looking very good for what we'll be able to pull out of the under expend from that. And just so anyone who is new to this, who wasn't a part of that original decision, knows, we use general fund dollars, so these aren't us moving somehow bond dollars or any other money. This was extra money that we put in from the general fund to make sure we could close that project. So we are feeling very good about having sufficient revenue to make a substantial down payment. It's just making sure that we know exactly how much. We also may use some under expend from this year to make sure that we're maximizing the down payment and minimizing our long-term debt.
I have a question about this building. I have some elderly neighbors, one of whom grew up here. He's 90 this year. And they are very invested in this building as community members. They made a comment to me that they thought that the land was owned by the school district because it used to be a school. Is that?
So we've actually been working through that. It's not that the land is owned by the school district, though it was. That is a correct statement. It was bought by the city for a total of $10, 80-some years ago. At the time, this was actually all a part of what's now known as the Waldorf property, so there was no 21st Street either. And so the conveyance allowed us to put the road through and to build City Hall during that time. There is a restriction on the property that it be used as a park. And then we promptly built a City Hall on it. So we've been in conversations with the school district. We're working through that process. They've asked us to start the engagement process and to hear from the community before they make any decisions about that deed restriction. But I think that it is important for the community to think about what's best for the community, and then the city will try and make that happen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the school district will have a member on the committee.
This was too easy. There's got to
On
be
that
more.
political note, I'll
Yeah.
entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Good work.
Thank you.